We'll start off with you, I guess, Chief Strange.
Well, I'll apologize in advance if my internet's getting a little shaky, but give me a signal if it breaks up. Welcome this morning. My name's Rob Strange. I'm the police chief in West Sacramento. I've been over here in this role for about 5 years now. I've been in law enforcement in the Sacramento region for over 25 years. Have been blessed to have this tool available to us for the last several years and are really continuing to learn how to use it. But like many of you, we not only battle for trust, but we battle for the actual, true, real feeling of support for our staff at times. And so finding any way to do that has definitely become part of the mission of my tenure here, is making sure our folks know that they're fully supported and able to do the work that really needs to be done in our community. We're, as the name indicates, directly west of the state capital, Sacramento, of California, but we're a different county and a different city. We experience a tremendous amount of traffic issues, homeless related issues, and we've got a community that's very engaged in wanting to see those things change, but also to do that professionally and compassionately. So lots on our plate all the time, as is the case everywhere else. And shout out to Vancouver, Washington, actually where I grew up until high school. So I see Kim's representing there. So welcome again. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Hey, good afternoon. John Thompson. I am the Chief of Police here in Greensboro, North Carolina. Recently just made famous, unfortunately, with the recent assassination attempt on former President Trump, and the individual being a longtime resident here in Greensboro. We were quietly going about our business here in North Carolina before that kind of upended us a little bit. But I have been in law enforcement for about 26 years now. I've been in Greensboro since 2003 and was promoted to chief at the end of 2002. So I've only been in my role a little less than 2 years up to this point. We are a city. We're about 135 square miles. We're really located in the central part of North Carolina. We're 3 hours from the beach and 3 hours from the mountains on either side. We're a population of about 300,000 and growing pretty quickly with a lot of economic development here in the region. Our department, we're about 650 sworn officers and 125 professional staff. And much like Chief Strange, we have similar concerns and issues in our community. The past few years, we've been battling some significant violent crime issues in the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, and we continue to have issues that I think many cities and jurisdictions across the country have in terms of the homeless and unsheltered. And one thing that we have seen, we kind of joke a little bit about here in our department, but it seems like after the pandemic, everybody forgot how to drive coming out of that. And so traffic has overwhelmingly been our number one community concern. And we've had the tool for, I think, right about 2 years now. And it's been invaluable for us in terms of really understanding the community sentiment around crimes and issues that are happening as a general tool, but also getting more specific into different neighborhoods and parts of the city. So grateful to be here, and we are an open book. So anything you want to know about our agency or how we utilize Zencity, we'll answer any questions we can.
Thanks, Chief. And then Chief Rahinsky, you want to introduce yourself? As Chief Rahinsky will be moderating today's session.
Sure. I just want to thank Chief Thompson and Chief Strange for making the time. I know I respect and appreciate how busy they both are. To their credit, they both recognize how important it is to hear from community and how important it is to share that message to other chiefs and people in those positions, that they've got the opportunity to hear from people who they normally wouldn't, And this is how they're operationalizing the data. So having said that, Chiefs, I'd like to just kind of start off with a question that I think is an interesting starting place. Once you started to receive the data, were there surprises when you initially saw it? Was there confirmation of what you had been prioritizing? What were your initial thoughts?
I'll jump in there if my signal's still holding up. So for us in West Sacramento, and I didn't mention it, but great job putting very different communities together in some way. Chief Thompson's dealing with a pretty big city, though I'm next to one. We're only a city of about 55,000 right now. But yeah, definitely near a very urban core. So similar issues. Chief, the reality was when we started getting the information back from, especially our city had the organic Zencity to begin with. So we were seeing kind of how the news feeds were playing in and some of the other feeds. But then when we started utilizing the Blockwise tool on top of that, it really did do a lot of confirmation. So for what we thought was going on, kind of what our, the windshield assessment and our gut feeling dealing with crime and public safety in general, it was very affirming. But man, it was really nice to have data points that could affirm what our hunch was.
It makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned news feed. I think we would all agree that there are times where the media narrative does not necessarily fit community sentiment. And to your point, it's nice to be able to look at the data and be able to make decisions based on data as opposed to just what you're hearing from a small group of people. Chief Thompson, same question. Did you see any surprises, or did it confirm a lot of what you had already been prioritizing within the department?
So for us, it was actually, I think, a significant surprise for our organization because we had been struggling since 2020 with significant levels of violent crime in our community. And so that was our focus and our priority coming out of 2020. We had set a record for homicides and aggravated assaults, started to decline a little bit in 21. Again, a little bit of a decline in 2022. And then 23, we spike again and set a record for homicides in that category. And what we had found out, though, consistently through the use of Zencity Blockwise was that was not the number one concern of our community. When we were figuring out how do we address this, where do we put all our resources, how do we address that issue, assuming that it was in the media, that's what the community wanted. And overwhelmingly, the number one issue in the community over the last 2.5 years has been traffic. Traffic complaints, traffic issues. And so it really kind of stopped us for a second. We're like, okay, hold on a second. We're missing something here. We've got our priorities internally, but this isn't overwhelmingly what the community wants us doing or what is impacting them. And so it really kind of made us have to figure out a balance between what we saw as a priority as a department and how do we address those priorities coming from the community as well.
Thank you, Chief. And if Chief Rahinsky, if I could just jump in. For folks who may be new to Blockwise, Zencity's public safety and law enforcement tool, or you're using it already and are looking for different ways to operationalize it, I do just want to share a couple of introductory slides of context around the types of data that we are collecting, because there are traditional engagement methods. I'm sure both in West Sacramento and in Greensboro, you always had some element of community engagement and ways to hear from the community. And so just shining some light on how the Zencity tools that you have, and the data sets that you just spoke about, how they may have changed perceptions or the different types of residents that you're hearing from. So just quickly jumping in, obviously we went through our panelists and we have a spotlight session for both of our chiefs to talk a little bit about their experiences and some case studies, and then we'll open it up to the roundtable. But just contextualizing, Zencity's public safety arm is really a performance management and trust building tool to help you hear from other corners of your community. We know across the board that trust in public safety is at one of its lowest rates that it's been. And it's because it's hard to hear from your community and to connect with your residents and understand what are those elements that truly they want you working on, how you can help build safety and trust and understand levels of fairness and transparency with your residents. But it's hard. And just to contextualize some of the more traditional methods that I'm sure a lot of agencies, use for public engagement, whether it's in-person meetings, whether it's surveys on phones, or sorry, on email, on mail or landlines. Oftentimes you're hearing from what we call the same 10 people or your frequent flyers. Sometimes it's inaccessible for folks who maybe English isn't their first language, or they have 2 jobs. Maybe they have a few kids and one of them has soccer practice. They might not always be able to engage with those touch points that you offer them within the community to engage with your departments and your agencies. And so there's an element of it where hearing beyond those same 10 people that you're normally hearing from and helping to lower those barriers of participation make it hard to build trust. And so that's what Zencity's Blockwise and Chief Strange, you mentioned, our organic tool, really here to help aggregate different elements of community feedback. Organic is a bit more of a passive tool to hear how people are already talking online, social media, and the news, versus our Blockwise tool, which is a monthly or a quarterly survey, which is actually targeting a representative demographic of your population to help align and understand those key questions and concerns for public safety and fairness, like we mentioned, across the community. And we do that by hitting their residents where they're at and reaching them in different ways. I know that there might be this perception that older folks might not be on, let's say, the internet, or it might be hard for, some families to access broadband. But according to the latest research by Pew, internet usage is across the board at record highs, with about 92% of Americans having access to internet on a consistent basis. And people are checking their phones almost 100 times a day. And that's the average. So I know there's a few of you in this roundtable today who might be well above that average. And if you have 2 phones, then double it. And so the idea behind these Blockwise surveys is to help hit your residents where they're at, which means targeting via digital ads. So if you're playing Candy Crush, let's say in the morning, or you're looking on a cooking blog for a dinner recipe, or you're reading the news, being able to target residents through those ads and just try to reach beyond who you might normally be talking to. So I hope that just contextualize it for folks who might need a refresher on the different types of Zencity tools. And so I think without further ado, Chief Rahinsky, if you want to kick us off, we can start the session.
Sounds great. So we've discussed just very briefly about when you received your first data. Let's start with Chief Thompson. Can you share with us how you're using the data? So other than having it as something that you can look at from a managerial or a chief's perspective, how else have you integrated into your operations?
Yeah, so it's been a little bit of a slow process for us, partially because we've had, over the last year and a half, when I came into the role, we had a significant amount of turnover in our command staff. We've had 2 sets of assistant chiefs. We have 4 assistant chiefs. So we've had 2 years ago 4 brand new assistant chiefs, and we have 4 different assistant chiefs at this time due to retirements, captains, lieutenants. So it's been kind of a slow process for us, but ultimately, one thing we have done is incorporate the Zencity survey results into our version of CompStat. And so as captains report out we have 4 patrol districts that our city's broken into, and as they report out, one of those categories are the Zencity survey results, the Blockwise results. And there was a little bit of struggle to start with, because they were getting the results. They saw what the community as a whole wanted in terms of sentiment and priority, but they were really action driven. Like, they wanted to know, hey, they're complaining about traffic. Well, where do I need to be for traffic? Where, and they would get some comments and feedback through the survey results of, hey, there's speeding on Elm Street, or there's reckless driving, but they were kind of struggling with really wanting to drill down into the information and make it actionable at their level. And we kind of had to help them understand it's really about understanding the sentiment. And when you have opportunity to do other work or do different work or adjust resources, that should be your general focus area. We're not using it as a tool to pinpoint a specific intersection or roadway. And so once they kind of understood that, they've really embraced it. And it's really been amazing for me to see them look at those and understand, okay, what can we do to impact what the community wants from us? We know what we need to do. We know what crimes are out there, what we have to do, but what does the community want from us? And when we have the opportunity and time, how can we impact what they're seeking from us? We have seen, at least in 2 instances, where we've utilized Zencity data or Blockwise data for grant applications. And so we were awarded the Community Violence Intervention and Prevention grant through the federal government. And as part of that grant, the survey results in the communities that were doing that work are utilized not only for the application, but to measure the effectiveness of those neighborhoods that we're going into. We've also recently used the Blockwise data for a grant that we're submitting with our Department of Transportation here at the city. So not a grant that we're directly involved with, but we're collaborating with them, and the Department of Transportation saw the data as invaluable to say, hey, here's 2,000 survey results, and their priority is community or traffic issues in our community. And thirdly was the prioritization of position assignments. So we've got assignments that we're creating now, and we're basing that partially off of what the community is asking us for. And so obviously traffic being their overwhelming #1 concern across the city, we're looking at standing up a new traffic unit. We're looking at adding radars to our field units, getting more officers radar certified and trained so that we have resources and availability to address the concerns from the community. The last, well, let me see, this is one thing that kind of surprised us a little bit when we looked at the results. So we had a patrol district with a captain that was extremely engaged with the community. Could call after hours, weekends, coming out just really community focused. And you saw the scores in that patrol division really go up in terms of safety, in terms of trust in the community. And we had a change in that assignment, and we had another captain go in that was perhaps a little bit weaker in that area. He was more internally focused on his officers and making sure they were supported, but we lost a little bit of that community engagement, and we saw that impacted in the scores. Over the period of 3-4 months, we saw those scores drop. And it wasn't used as a knock on that captain. It was actually an opportunity for us to grow and develop them, to say, hey, look at what's happened here. What can we do to help you be better in this area? How can we help you engage the community more? How can we help you through whatever means we have in the department to make this better for you? And the captain was extremely receptive, and he made some changes, and he reached out for help. And ultimately we think we made him better in his job and better for the community. The last thing I'll share really was a success we've had with the Blockwise data when we talk about traffic. And again, I know I've said traffic a lot, and that's because that's all we hear from our community is traffic constantly. #1, I think you see that one of the charts here, streets and traffic at the top. That's consistently what it is. So we had our traffic unit create a campaign with a number to report traffic complaints. And you see it on the slide here with 373 slow. And in conjunction with that, we also brought on a social media manager who manages all of our social media platforms. So we heard the feedback from the community. As a result of that, we created an opportunity for them to file specific complaints so we would know where to work and where to deploy our resources. We sent officers into those areas, and then we communicated back to the community results as it relates to specific campaigns. And so I think on the previous slide, it talks about that feedback loop. It really became a conversation for us. We were like, okay, here's what you're telling us, community. And then we told them what we were going to do. And we actually told them, look, we're going to be on Elm Street this date, these hours, and we're going to be writing tickets. So if you're out here, expect to get a ticket. And we still had people out there violating traffic laws. We wrote the tickets and then came back and said, well, we told you we were going to be here. This is what we did. This is the results. And then we were surprising to, again, get feedback from the community. Thank you. They supported our efforts. Glad that we heard them, and not that we just heard them and filed away, but we actually took some actions to show we were listening and wanted to address those concerns. And that was probably one of the more positive recent interactions that we've had with our community regarding Blockwise results. So we're still incorporating it into other areas, but we're starting to see other departments across the city ask us about results and the data that's coming in, and how could they impact those results, or transportation department, Parks and Recs department, things like that.
I give you credit, Chief. It sounds like you've really taken the data and helped use it as a managerial tool. Chief Strange, with a smaller agency and fewer resources and having to make tougher decisions in terms of what you're going to prioritize on a daily basis, how has the data helped your organization?
Yeah, I'd love to dive into that. That last slide that was up about closing the loop, I will just say, as a user of some of these products, and again, whatever you're doing out there in your organizations, that model, I just think, is an excellent way to look at how to use this information. We know that our communities, they both want to be heard, but they also want us to do something about what it is that they're sharing with us. I will say, just that said, to answer your question, Chief, I think for us, one of the biggest challenges historically had been, having an idea of what the concerns and issues are in our community, and then trying to resource to those as a small agency. If we're going to focus in one area, that's because we're compromising somewhere else. That's just the equation that we work in. And so with that in mind, having the ability to put some effort towards some of these concern areas is more viable, and it doesn't feel like we're just chasing the loud voice, right? Where I think a lot of our agencies, and I know we were there at one point too, where the loudest voice won the attention of somebody with some type of influence and power, and it usually meant that we were going to have to jump to go do something that sometimes we just didn't think brought the biggest value for our community. Felt like it was maybe even off mission sometimes. And so the data for me, especially being able to aggregate everything, has been really powerful for being able to sort of temper the excitement about loud voices. And I think it's done so effectively when I can use the actual tool, the actual feedback, which is consistent. Again, we see streets and traffic, we see homelessness, we see the same things. And then we also see it sometimes geographically centered. So it allows us to have that insight. And I don't think I think we all probably use the tool a little bit differently. Right now, it's still largely held at the top level of the organization. And we're actually just starting to roll it out to the public here shortly, in the sense of posting the quarterly reports. Again, making sure they know that we've heard. But behind the scenes, what's been nice when you think about that whole feedback loop, we hear the feedback, and then our social media team, which is not a full-time team, so we're doing that kind of part-time as well, they are able to actually look to how can we curate content, and for us operationally actually do the actions around the areas of biggest concern, both topic area and geographic area, and then make sure we're reporting back on those particular actions via the social media platform that probably drove the results of the surveys to us. So I think it increases trust and satisfaction when you see that loop either directly or sort of indirectly, as I described, fully closed.
I really appreciate the well thought out answer. I think as a profession for a long time now, we've been talking about doing more with less. But in reality, you reach a point where it's finite, where you can only do so much, and you have to make some difficult decisions as an organization and as a leader in terms of what you're going to prioritize. I like how you're both sharing that feedback loop in terms of building trust. Have you done that in terms of sharing it with elected officials, sharing it with community leaders and other stakeholders? I know you alluded to, Chief Strange, how you're kind of crawl, walk, and run in terms of sharing the data. Where are you on that voyage?
Yeah, we definitely have with our electeds. It's been a core piece in the last couple of years of a run up and really being able to better illustrate very validated concerns about our resource levels and our response times and a lot of other things that we know, and we know from other analysis we've done as well as just what we know from our day-to-day work. But having another prong of feedback that's sourced from the community that we're supposed to be serving has been powerful. So over the last couple of years, we've been doing assessments not only of the police services, but also our fire services, our parks maintenance, and our roads. Our roads, we got hit with some pretty big storms a few years ago, just annihilated our roadways, and really, we're not unique. It's happened all over this region, but it has become just such a profound issue for the community, and it also, we know as a city, we're not getting tremendously new, and big resources when it comes to revenue coming into the city. So we were able to illustrate this issue of gaps in operational resources for the city in really core areas and this revenue challenge. And so using that over the last couple of years and using the data that we've gathered both in the organic sense, but really from the Blockwise surveys, it has helped empower and better explain and elevate the discussion around new revenues. And so it's led us to the fact we're in election season right now, and locally we have a tax measure offered to the community that actually is meant to address these core issues that, through a few different analysis and especially utilizing this ongoing Blockwise survey that addresses things like response time questions, biggest issues in the community, biggest geographical challenges. It has really colored in the picture much more vividly about where the gaps are. So it's made for a much more cogent argument for at least getting the tax measure presented. And I don't want to jump ahead, but at some point, let's talk about the utilization of the Pulse survey and what we're looking at doing now in this election season.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect segue. So, Allison, I'm going to turn it over to you so we can cover that important piece.
Yep, and I think it's just popcorning back over to Chief Strange, I think, to walk through kind of the Blockwise implementation aspects from your team, and then we can open the floor for questions.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, like all the things that Allison said, we still do our community meetings. We still have all those engagements. I still believe that, and I think this tool has helped, but it's been my belief, especially through the major controversies of our profession in the last 10 years, it's no more important than the present to make sure that we're establishing real relationships with people in our community, of lowering the barriers to access to us, to our information. I mean, most of us have probably sat back and finally realized, man, we really kept a lot of stuff secret, but nothing's really secret in our work. It really isn't. And when it comes to, the crux of how do we get support in a time when media wants to tear it down, a lot of other folks are finding it politically convenient to tear down policing. Well, the baseline that we can work from, I think, is just making sure that we have those levels of interaction and those barriers are lowered. So that's been part of the reason why this tool has been really, really helpful for us. But we're still early. We're a few years in and still early, because I think we know in our business that there is no good time to start something new or to stop something. You just have to take the step. And so we did that. We did that with, we're still in a mess of a records management system. So we don't even have great data on our own stuff, things that we should all have at our fingertips. But what we do have is data on the sentiment of the community. We have other advisory boards that help work with data and data transparency. I have one that's just a general Chiefs advisory board that helps us, make sure we're not losing sight of what's impacting different communities across the city. But really, this is just part of that bigger picture of making sure that we're hearing from all different parts of the community, because we do know in our community it's very different in our case from both north to south and from east to west as far as who makes up our community, and relatively speaking, how much they feel their voice historically has been heard or not. And so this tool and other efforts that we're doing, very intentional about making sure we can reach folks that probably felt like their voice would never be heard. And it's been a game changer for us as far as being able to reach populations that are not English speaking. And so it gives us the ability to see things in ways that we just did not see before. Despite our best efforts, we were still thinking through the lens of, what as a police chief do I think is the best thing this community needs, without really having a ton of interaction with them, and certainly not a more representative interaction across the city. So although early in the stage, I think as we start really pushing out, here's what you told us, and here's what we did about it, that storytelling, I think it will only actually drive more utilization of the tool, which will just better inform that picture.
Yeah, I like the use of the term storytelling, because I think you both make good points in that listening to community and then taking action is half the battle, but then letting them know that you've heard from them and letting them know that what you did was on their behalf, I think really helps close that trust loop. Chief Thompson, with your city, touch on a little bit, if you would. Obviously, legitimacy and trust go hand in hand in terms of being able to withstand a critical incident and really being able to do the nuts and bolts of policing. Where do you see that interplay between measuring trust and working to improve it?
Yeah, I think every law enforcement agency across the country, in the last 8, 10, 15 years knows that you have to prepare before a critical incident. I mean, those relationships have to be built long before that ever happens. It can't happen during a critical incident or shortly after. It's too late at that point. And so without having the ability to really understand where you're at any given point in time, that was really the challenge of the way we historically would collect information and data to understand. And so I remember 12, 13, 14 years ago, new chief came into the organization and they hired a company that went out door to door, phone calls, getting survey results. And it was a very short snapshot in time of results. And that may have been fine then, but now we know that we could wake up tomorrow and things could be in complete disarray, not because of anything we did in Greensboro or West Sacramento, but it could be a city thousands of miles away from us. And so really having that thumb on the pulse of that trust in the community is just critical, because if we start to see that slide, whether it's through incidents that happen outside our city or because of things that we're not doing correctly internally, maybe we're not addressing their concerns, we're not listening to their input and their feedback, we're not being open and transparent, it really can, I think, put a city or a police department at a disadvantage. I will like to jump back quickly. We've seen something that is kind of surprising, what Chief Strange had brought up about with regards to, again, probably like most cities across the country, there's a small few in our community that seem to have that loudest voice, and they're always showing up at council meetings and they're always sending emails. And we've actually seen certain council members utilize the Blockwise data to push back on those folks to say, well, I appreciate you're bringing this concern, but I have a survey result of 400 responses last month that tell me traffic is their priority. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I have 400 people telling me something different. And over the course of 6, 7, 8 months, I've got 3,000 people telling me something different. So they're actually able to get that input from, again, what Chief Strange said, of those individuals that historically never provided input or were never given an opportunity to provide that input. And I had a city council member in a meeting bring up the Blockwise results, saying, well, I appreciate what you're bringing to me, but this is what I'm hearing from a lot more people in the community, and this is why we're doing what we're doing, and this is why we're supporting this. So, but yeah, just back to that point, trust. If you don't know where you stand in the community with that trust, you don't know what you need to do to either build it back or know that you're in a good place prior to that critical incident happening.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think as a profession, when we have these difficult conversations, everyone recognizes, to your point, you've got to lay the foundation for trust, and how critical it is for you to be able to withstand those inevitable challenges. Having said that, the ability to measure it, track it over time, and see what affects it, not every agency has that ability at the moment. But as we're seeing more and more thinking along those lines, I want to toss it to Allison, who's going to go a little deeper on the information that Chief Strange was sharing. Chief, you had an upcoming ballot measure, and you're going to use the tool. And can you talk a little bit about how that decision was made and what other stakeholders you brought into that discussion?
Yeah, certainly. So, and I'll let Allison kind of talk about the nuts and bolts of how that gets done. But so regularly meeting with our I don't know the guy's formal title, but our account lead, helping us really. The beauty of this has been it's not just some static thing, right? It's been discussions every month saying, could we do that? Could we do this? How do we blend this? How do we really draw in enough information to make the most actionable picture come to life? And so as we talked about this, I'm reminded about with this ability that we have to these pulse surveys, something of note that you want to learn about in your community. I'm certain I've had these things come to mind many times over the course of my career. You probably all have. I don't always remember I have the tool handy, by the way. But as we were discussing this, I thought, I like most of us, we can't campaign. We can't go out there and do that active work, but we definitely have a responsibility and can inform. And so certainly we can do that just by pushing information out, but sometimes by asking the right question, we get people actually more engaged. And so the thought with the utilization of the pulse survey at this point was, as we're largely a mail-in ballot state now, and so as those ballots are coming out here, probably now or in the next couple of weeks, we wanted to also make sure that the survey goes out to say, did you know that we're utilizing this tool? Did you know that the tool is, can you guess of these topics? What is the biggest concern? And guess what? It's all the operational areas that the city's already trying to address. And did you know that there's a tax measure going forward? Did you know that it's intended to do, I'm sure the questions are going to be crafted much better than what I'm putting forward. But the point is, it is going to create a more informed voting population as a result, which I think we desire most of the time around the cities and counties that we work in, states that we work in. And so we have the information. We're just not always getting it into folks' hands. And so the Pulse survey will be able to do that and even be able to land after the survey is completed in a page that directs folks to different links for further information. So it's another way of getting more information out there that's just factual information the city's already put together. We can let folks come to their own determination about which way they want to fall on the actual measure, but at least wherever they fall, our hope is that they're going to be much more informed when they actually cast their vote.
No, I think it's really well said, Chief, and I think you touched on an important part. Transparency is great, but unless people know how to access the information, or in our case, in your case, you're actively reaching out to them to share information. So I think it changes the dynamic and makes that a much better informed populace.
Great. And I also think Chief Strange, when we had, spoken about the upcoming ballot measure, you had mentioned when it comes to prioritizing resources of knowing, if this does pass and the money becomes available, being able to make sure that it aligns with the community's needs. And so I'm curious, is the Pulse playing into that part as well?
Yeah, I think that will help us. I know that we are challenged, and to go back to the original question, I think Chief, you had asked about who else is working on this. So though it was the police department contract technically that had the pulse survey, we kicked this over to the city manager's office to try to help, accelerate or broaden that information campaign, if you will. And then I'm sorry, Allison, you were asking. Oh, yeah, I think part of what we want to do, the integrity of if what we're saying at the front end as a city about what the intended purpose is of this tax measure, it's really important that we follow through with integrity. And so some of what has been identified already is some of the initial utilizations for those theoretical dollars that will come in a few different operation departments. And so we want to make sure that we're also utilizing these same tools to understand has the level of satisfaction and trust, frankly, in the government, which generally is low. But when it comes to this specifically, we should be able to have a baseline and then be able to survey again what it looks like when we start following through on the commitments we have made. So I think that's going to be not only important for this, but important for that sort of trust building around the financial integrity and budgeting integrity of the whole city, which I've discovered through this process. Man, you think policing has a low trust level, try doing government finance. So so anywhere where we can help the broader team, it helps us too. So it helps us deliver the mission that much better.
Great. And I know we are very close on time. We're happy to spend a couple of extra minutes if any other participants want to share questions in the Q&A. But Chief Symington did send a Q&A through, and so I'm just going to call this out just to hear both chiefs' perspectives when it comes to sharing data with council, your command staff, when you're using day-to-day or operationally. Are you using live dashboards, reports, benchmarking? Just curious, like I'm sure it's pick your poison depending on what you prefer, but I'm curious to hear from both of you how you're sharing the data.
Yeah, I'll so we're using a little bit of everything with that. So our command, we have 13 captains, 22 lieutenants that all have logins to the system, so they can log in, view the dashboard, see those results. And what we've done is incorporate that. They're expected to know and see that, because as we have our weekly CompStat meetings, that is a measure that they're asked to report out on. So we do right now, we post our reports online. We are in the process of changing our records management system, and that's the only reason we have not gone forward and created a dashboard that would be a little more interactive. So over the next 10, 12 months, as we transition to a new RMS system, we will build in the ability for that interactive dashboard with our results. And then we send a biweekly report to all of our elected officials and city leadership, where we will kind of summarize and pull information from those results to go to our elected officials.
It's really interesting, Chief, that you've been that transparent with it to elected officials. I think in terms of measuring your success, the success of your department, I don't think traditional metrics have always served us well. I think they miss a large part of what we've improved upon in the last 10 or 15 years. And you touched on that, building relationships, and now that's the currency you need to withstand those crises that inevitably come up. Can you envision a time where public sentiment might be right up there with crime data, where residents and elected officials want to know what you're seeing in terms of sentiment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think that comes when we create that dashboard. And, again, I think like Chief Strange said, we're new to this and we're getting it incorporated, but we don't refer to it as Blockwise. We know Zencity is the company, but that's almost becoming common language now in the department among command of, oh, well, the Zencity results said this, and oh, Zencity's saying we need to do this, and so we're working on this. And I really see that as we continue to incorporate it in our organization, that it not only spreads outside of the police department, but it starts being incorporated into other city departments, and ultimately the community wanting to know or being able to see that data to say, oh, hey, overwhelmingly, the majority of people in the city trust the police department. You know, they support, they feel safe. And so, yeah, as much as community looks at that crime stats, I honestly believe that as we build this into our culture, it'll be something that the community sees and want to see those sentiment scores as well.
Thanks, Chief.
Yeah, I just would comment that what I'm hearing today is aspirational. How to operationalize this even more and have it to be a little bit more present in front of somebody's view that works here, I think is a really move forward that's important, because I think that there's what we know and what we see going on in the community, especially our folks that are out there working directly with the community. And I think that the Zencity results are just a great blend, a complement to what they're seeing, and sometimes a challenge to make sure that the lens isn't getting so cloudy by just going to that same place every day 3 times, which is so common, right? Just to be able to pull back and go, okay, no, but the community, the broader community, yes, they support us. Even if I'm dealing with Johnny over here on the corner 7 times this week and he's got nothing good to say to me, that we can check that a little bit. But I think also when you asked your question, Chief, about, you know, what do we think for the future of this? I think that once electeds really understand how to utilize this tool and how to utilize it and leverage it for their conversations and ultimately influence their decisions, I think that we're probably going to have to do more to like bat them back from only using it sometimes, and making sure that there's some tempered, you know, the reality that we know sometimes about what's going on in sort of the dark spaces in our communities still have to play into those conversations. But I think it'll drive us into more productive conversations much sooner than working without a tool that we think truly does reach all of our communities across our cities in a way that's just been more effective than any other method that's been tried, at least in my community.
Amazing. And thank you, Chief Rahinsky, for that forward thinking and aspirational question. I think it's a great place for us to end because I know we are at time. I cannot say thank you enough to Chief Strange and Thompson. And I think ending on this note of setting that standard for community aligned policing and how you're integrating it into your workflows is a great takeaway for everyone who's watching this. So thank you again to both of you for your time today and for your insights. And obviously we'll be sending out the recording to all of the registrants to this session today. So thank you.